Thank you very much, Mr Chair. It's perhaps time now to respond to the first tranche of questions from members on this issue of Clause 9 and the changes we're making to the way in which fellows are, or who's included to be a fellow in the way in the committee that makes the final approval. One set of questions that Nanaia Mahuta asked about, firstly to start off, that the number of fellows has been kept at 12 new fellows each year. So in effect this is raising the bar for whom can become a fellow by including the humanities but keeping the number of fellows at 12. And that's a decision that perhaps in time the Royal Society might decide they want to revisit because there will now be a much wider pool of people who can potentially put themselves forward to be fellows. But for now, they are staying with 12. Both Steve Chadwick and Nanaia Mahuta asked about the question of posthumous fellowship, and it's clear when we look at the rules for becoming a fellow that to be a fellow, the key clause is from I'm reading here from the Academy bylaws from June 2010, clause A6, which says that no person shall be nominated or elected as a fellow unless he or she is 1, a citizen or permanent resident of New Zealand, 2, has been a New Zealand resident for at least 3 years during his or her career, and 3, normally spends at least 6 months in New Zealand each year. So it's quite clear that for the question of being a fellow of the society, one has to fulfil those criteria, and sadly if one is deceased one won't be able to do that. However, and we are coming back to this in a later clause, so I don't want to go into too much detail, the question of honorary fellows of the society is much more open and is at the absolute discretion of what is now called the Academy Executive Committee. And so I would presume from that, and reading through the bylaws here of the society that cover honorary fellows, there is nothing in here that would exclude posthumous awarding of a fellowship. And I certainly would agree with Nanaia Mahuta that there would be a number of people who could be put forward for that. One of the changes, very positive changes that was made during this committee stage debate, showing the value of an extensive committee stage debate, was Te Ururoa Flavel's amendment that brought in Te Reo Māori and Māori studies within the humanities. And so I think should people want to go down that path of recognising those perhaps from disciplines that haven't previously been part of the Royal Society, there may well be a way to do that via the honorary fellowship awards. So I do think it's possible. But it is quite clear that when one goes through the list of the current Royal Society fellows, there are very, very few. In fact, having just flicked through it now, and at the risk of what could be called racial profiling, but at the risk of missing out some people I'm not familiar with, looking through this list of those that I am familiar with, there is in fact only one Māori fellow, and that's Mason Jury. And obviously Mason Jury is an academic of significant scholarship and research, but nobody else in the list here is identifiable to me. Things get worse when we head to the Pacific sector, when in fact I can identify no one in the list of fellows who has a Pacific background. And as I think Sue Williams CEO asked, I am sure by including the humanities there will be a change within that. And I think of someone like Albert Wendt, who is somebody who would quite clearly, I think, be deserving of a fellowship. To pick someone out is perhaps a bit unfortunate, but that I'm sure there will be people. In terms of Dr. Chowdhury's intervention from ethnic communities in New Zealand, again, there are some. Manning Ip is in here, as is Dr. Chowdhury's former colleague Harjinder Singh from the Radette Centre at Massey University. So there is some representation, but I do think it's quite clear that Clause 9.1 will now broaden out the range of people who are likely to become fellows, and that's a very, very good thing. But the question was also asked about the kinds of people who are in there now, and I just think of one person who's graced this chamber, Simon Upton, as a fellow of the Royal Society, and a person with a broad range of scientific knowledge, who was a terrific Minister of Science. And in another life I worked for Simon Upton as a foreign affairs official, and he was a person who brought an incredible scientific brain to that job. He was the chair of the United Nations Commission on Sustainable Development when I worked with him, and that commission was charged with developing an oceans policy for the United Nations. And Simon Upton was able to bring his extensive scientific knowledge to the table to ensure, Mr. Chair, thank you, to ensure that both a political and a scientific approach was taken. So as a fellow of the Royal Society, there is somebody who's already got a humanities part to his background. Simon Upton, has an extensive experience and now working at the OECD around sustainable development and issues. Another couple of people who I've had the privilege of working with who are also fellows of the Royal Society covered here under Section 9. One of those is Richie Poulton. Now, Richie Poulton runs the Multidisciplinary Centre at Otago University. This is the centre that works with a cohort of people born in 1972 at Queen Mary Hospital in Dunedin. It has the longitudinal study in the world with the highest retention rate. 96% of the people who were started in that longitudinal study in 1972 remain in it now. And it's a remarkable study that Richie Poulton, a fellow of the Royal Society, has led. It now has not only those people, but of course a lot of those people now have children. They're in their late 30s, and those children are now part of the study. And they've actually gone back and spoken to the parents of the people who were in the study as well. So it's actually 3 generations, and that work that Richie Poulton is leading down there now has got a whole genetic basis to it. There's a lot of work around genetic makeup, an awful lot of work that's been used by the current government and also by previous governments around things like conduct disorder, being able to understand and predict what are some of the issues that children will have in early life that may lead to problems in later life. So Richie Poulton is a fellow of the Royal Society on the basis of that work that is internationally renowned. And that's the standard we're talking about. With only 360 odd fellows, we're talking about a standard of research and scholarship, and I absolutely respect the comments, the questions that colleagues have put to me about those people from other backgrounds than the traditional European male background that dominates the Royal Society Fellowship. And I'm sure as time comes and the number of people from Māori and Pacific backgrounds who participate in tertiary education increases, which it happily did under the last Labour government, then we will be able to see those people flow through into the Fellowship of the Royal Society. Just one more point, Mr. Chair, in regards to the kinds of people who have membership of the Royal Society. It is people who are at the cutting edge. And recently in the Dominion Post, some colleagues may have read about the work of a father-son combination, and the father of that is Brian Robinson, and he has developed a wound healing gel that can be used specifically. He began his work on people who had nose reconstructions and was able to use this wound healing gel that means that wounds heal quicker. It's non-invasive, there's no stitches, there's nothing like that. And this has been developed by a father and son combination. Brian Robinson is a chemist, his son is a dentist actually, and he's obviously used it within the dental area. Brian Robinson's a fellow of the Royal Society, and just last week the work that they've been doing has been patented and is now going to be taken on by American companies, I'm quite sure. Actually, that's where a lot of the work around this leading edge science goes. So people who are fellows of the Royal Society are not just people from the past who've got on and managed to develop a scientific record and are now in some form of semi-retirement. It's people who are at the cutting edge of science, and Brian Robinson is certainly one example of that kind of person. So to sum up on those questions, Mr. Chair, I think it is sobering to look at the list of fellows of the Royal Society and say, yes, it does need to be enhanced by a greater representation from Māori, Pacific and communities and other ethnic minorities, and also women. There are a number of women on the Royal Society Fellows list, but far out of proportion or not in proportion to the number of women academics even, let alone the number of women in society. So, I think we respect those who are fellows of the Royal Society, but recognise that in Clause 9 today we are beginning a process that will see an expansion of the number of people who can be part of that, but also perhaps a change in the demographic of the people who can be part of that. And I thank my colleagues for having raised those questions because they are important ones, and I think the Fellowship of the Royal Society covered here by Clause 9 will continue to be the pinnacle of achievement for people in the science and technology areas, and now happily also in the humanities areas as well.
Sue Moroney.
Chair.